The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, Segment 1 students, to today's continuing continuing series, I guess I should say, on planets squared the nodal axis. So today we're going to explore Uranus square the nodes, and it's Kim Marie's turn. So we're going to use her as our chart example a little later on in the broadcast in about an hour. But for now, I'll turn it over to Kim, and thanks for joining us.
I forgot to check to see if it automatically started recording. Hold on. Yes, okay. All right, everyone. Welcome to our Segment 1 class for May of 2018. Today we're going to look at Uranus square the nodes. Before we get started, here's our happy little housekeeping slide that shows you our free weekly audio podcast, our Astro Library, and of course the other segments of the course if you're interested in them. Jumping right in general, when we look at astrology and astrological archetypes, EA is always based upon observe and correlate. In other words, an archetype can have a spectrum of meaning from 100% positive to 100% negative, and you can assume where it's going to or how it's going to express itself. You actually have to observe it through the person or chart in question that you're looking at. Another basic of EA is that we will look at the planet, sign, and house as being one archetype. And in this example you see on your screen, Mars rules Aries and Mars rules the first house. Mars, Aries, first house, all the same archetypical principle. Similarly, you can look at Taurus, second house, and ruler Venus as the inner side of Taurus, or the inner side of Venus, excuse me, but still also all the same archetype. And so if you just will start as a beginner of astrology and just learn the 12 archetypes of the zodiac, then you can extrapolate it to the planets and the houses, and then you can start to blend a planet in a sign and a house. Now, jumping right into the archetype of Uranus, here we see that Uranus is the ruler of the sign Aquarius and the 11th house. And Aquarius and the 11th house make up the active polarity, which is energy moving outward from the center. Fixed modality, meaning a mode of action that wants to sustain, persevere, and of course the element of air, which is mental. So here we're looking at fixed air that is always wanting to express itself and express its opinion. Now, one thing that I will say, as we go through these each of these planets square the nodes, and we'll look at this specifically with a slide coming up, but as we look at these planetary archetypes, they are skipped steps when the planet is square the nodes. So each of these archetypes we look at, or principles within the archetype, I could say, as we then go into chart examples, we're looking at something not working correctly or evolving. In other words, there is a stuck energy relative to the planet and its archetypes. So the first thing we'll look at with Uranus, though, is that it is the principle of the individuated unconsciousness. The unconscious mind, what we're not typically aware of. Compare that to the conscious mind or left brain or Mercury, and you can be listening to this podcast and making notes. You can be wondering whether or not you shut the stove off from boiling water, or in other words, that conscious mind can have all these little details that are just rumbling all over the place, whereas the unconscious mind is below the surface. And so it pops information up into consciousness periodically. And of course, this is whenever a planet is aspecting natal Uranus, or when forecasting Uranus via transit progression solar arc is aspecting natal planets. That will then activate that individuated unconsciousness to release information to the surface. It will do it periodically all the time without aspects, but the planetary aspects of forecasting Uranus or aspects to natal Uranus will activate it more frequently. Now, the individuated unconsciousness contains 3 different parts to it. It is the past and all its detail from this life and all of our past lives. It is the area of the brain we will access with past life regression work or hypnotherapy looking into past lives. It is the suppression of the present in regards to anything we don't want to deal with. I really don't want to confront my sibling in regards to something that just pissed me off. I'm just going to ignore it and pretend, she didn't say it. And so what happens? It stirs below the surface and sooner or later comes back up. And oh, by the way, 6 months ago, you told me, blah, blah. It is also the blueprint of the future. And this is where we read in the astrology books about that lightning bolt, that aha piece of information that just sparks for us. We will have all 3 of these areas come up into the conscious mind when we have Uranus aspects activated. And we kind of have to then do a little bit of discernment. Well, is this something from the past? Is it something that I'm trying to ignore, or is it the future and I need to pay attention? And of course, with the blueprints of the future-orientated messages, we say you must pay attention to the element of repetition. Once or twice, fantasy, wishful thinking, or way down the road, 5, 10, 15 years. But what comes up into consciousness as a future-orientated message of its own, again, 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 again. This is where your own soul is needing to evolve towards in the next 6 to 12 months, in the near future. Many of us, though, will have a tendency to ignore some of these future-orientated messages, especially when they are too different from the status quo. Example is someone who is married and they keep getting this message of wanting to be by themselves, or they get a message that something doesn't feel right in the relationship. And lo and behold, down the road, they decide to leave the relationship in the first example, or second example, husband has an affair or wife has an affair and leaves them. So again, all 3 parts of the unconsciousness can come up to the surface, and you've got to then use some of that left brain discernment to figure out past, present, future, and what is it I need to do? How is it I need to change? What is it I'm becoming aware of in regards to myself? Now, the Uranus archetype is also the principle of deconditioning, or breaking free from any crystallized or outmoded forms of self-definition. Now, past life and current life conditioning factors make up all of this, and it can be everything. Those of you who have followed the classes over the years with me, I've come up with this term, our environmental conditionings, and we get that type of information as we look at a chart. comes from the parents, our early environment, society, religion, the relationships we create, our economic conditioning factors, and how we move through the issues with resources on our own as an adult. You know, conditioning factors can be anything and everything, and they can come from anywhere. And as we move through our life, we're always trying to break free from these conditioning factors. The current life ones from our early environment, and then past life conditioning factors as they become conscious within our soul. Now, there are 3 reactions to the deconditioning principle. The first one was where we will resist. We want to cling to the past. This is a Saturnian reaction. Tomorrow will never be as good as yesterday. Today is never as good as yesterday. All you have to do is get into a conversation with some senior citizens and they'll, you know, defend the past. I don't know about you kids and all this social media and stuff that you do and blah, 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 everything else. Another reaction is to just totally go for it. However change is presenting itself, we embrace it and we hop on board and we make the changes, even if they're radical. This is a Uranian reaction. We really do want to break free from any conditioning factors. The most common reaction is the third one. We will change in some ways, resist in other ways. And this is a combination of Saturn and Uranus together. And when we want to change in some ways, typically it's, you know, new stuff coming forth that feels okay, that doesn't disrupt security too much, something that excites us. Where we resist in some ways, it usually is affecting our sense of security and making us insecure in some way. And so we want to then, you know, cling to that status quo and resist the change because of that need to feel secure. Now, all of us then, you will hear about Uranus being the sign of friendship in some of your traditional astrology. Well, what this is, being fixed air, is we are attracted to people who have the same mental attitudes as we do. So we become attracted to like-minded groups that will react the same way we do, and we bond with those groups. And as you know, if you just look out there collectively on society, you have what you would call the conservative or exclusive faction that kind of clings to the past in some way, not totally. And then you will have some of the progressive, liberal, or inclusive factions, and they're always wanting to change things and move things forward. Now, big subject, we could get into it in all kinds of details. Then there are most people who kind of back and forth depending upon what feels comfortable or what's popular or what information is coming to them. So this these 3 reactions to the deconditioning principle happen individually, and they also happen collectively within groups of people in any race, any society, any country. Uranus is also the principle of detachment. That means learning as we decondition and break free, we learn how to step out of or away from any of those conditioning factors. For instance, you know, I was raised with a Christian religion and, you know, was, you know, married in the church with my first marriage. And was very caught up in all of that. And when my divorce happened, as you're going to see, one of my conditioning factors, I was married at 20, basically boy next door, boy from the same church. His dad, my mom worked together for the same company. So, all the familial things growing up. And then married at 20, at 26, he divorced me for my best friend. So I lost 2 people. I broke away from the church at that point and never went back. And I started studying religion and spirituality, and I could, detach to the perspective that I would go, wait a minute, what's this BS about women either being the virgin or the whore? This is, so that principle of detachment is being able to step outside of the space-time situation that you were born into or that you are living in at the moment, being able to step outside of that and look at it and see where the conditioning factors are, see where consensus society says right, wrong, and decide for yourself whether you agree or not. So from that detachment, what we're doing then is really learning to develop a sense of objectivity. I'll decide for myself whether or not astrology is the work of the devil as we respond to the consensus judgments around astrology. Now, Uranus is also the principle of trauma, be it in the present life or be it in past lives as well. And remember, the part of the individuated unconsciousness is the past in all its detail of every life we've lived. Well, if we have a past life where the lover died, or we starved to death, or the war came through and we didn't make it, that trauma gets trapped and it fractures within the soul, and it's still there, but it's in the unconsciousness. It's below the surface. Sometimes we work with past life regression therapy to actually draw it up so that we can heal it. Sometimes it will, again, spontaneously pop up into consciousness on its own. But if you see an activated Uranus, Aquarius, or 11th house in somebody's chart, you can start to question, is there a stronger degree of trauma within this soul than somebody who doesn't have 5 aspects, for example? We all have trauma to some degree because we all have Uranus, Aquarius, in the 11th house in our chart. And as a matter of fact, from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, 85 to 90% of souls are born with past life trauma, or what we will call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And many of us will run around with that from a past life, and we don't even recognize what's triggering us. Now, trauma is defined as an intense disturbance caused by a shocking event or stress, think long-term stress. And this shocking event and stress can happen spiritually, mentally, emotionally, or physically, or all of the above. And it has a lasting effect. If we live through, the event, a parent having a child, die to disease at 8 years old, the parent lives through the event, but they have experienced such loss that it is a traumatic event for them. And so with time, that trauma for the parent may stay on the surface to some degree, but it can also then go into the subconscious or semi-conscious area, sometimes even down into the unconscious if it is something that we just totally suppress and ignore and don't talk about or look at. The whole lesson around trauma is to address the healing of that event when it happens, to just not let it fester, to, you know, work through it with some type of alternative or traditional therapy. Now, one thing that I would also like to say, because Uranus is the element of air, and it is that fixed modality, that persevering modality. So fixed air, persevering mental. Uranus specifically rules mental trauma. So things like obsessive compulsive disorder, sociopathic behaviors, the multiple personality disorder where a soul has been through such extreme trauma that they fracture off into multiple personalities, and one part is not aware of the other part, and it's a very incohesive fracturing mental trauma that can just, you know, cause havoc on the soul in question. And of course, any of your neuroses or psychoses, those are all, again, under that label of mental trauma with a specific rulership by Uranus. There can be other factors that will co-rule. However, again, what we are looking at with Uranus is wanting to heal the trauma, to change the effect that trauma has on us, to work through the trauma versus just suppressing it one more time or staying stuck in the trigger, stuck in the anger or stuck in the depression or whatever, you know, the mental, emotional situation is to any unique soul. Uranus also rules the principle of individualization. So we want to decondition, then we want to step back and objectify with detachment, and then we move forward as an individual, uniquely who we are. So Uranus, I sometimes will say, it's the principle of deconditioning and liberating. Liberating into what? Into ourself, into our own natural law, and then into natural spiritual law. We want to be ourself. We're breaking free from consensus. We are liberating into a unique individual soul and recognizing that within ourselves. And as we do that, as we individualize, then we transform ourselves. Transformation is a Uranian word, or Aquarius 11th house word. We change into something else than we were before. I was quite shy when I was younger. It'll come up every so often, but for the most part, I'll recognize it and I can get myself to speak up and speak out however I need to. So this individualization process just allows us to revolutionize, to evolve, to become more than we were before. We experiment with new thoughts, with new ideas. It allows new desires to come along that allow us to keep changing, to keep being in the process of becoming versus, you know, staying stuck. You know, I could have experienced an ex leaving me for my best friend, and I could have remained stuck. I could have went into depression. I could have went into victimization. No one will love me. Instead, that traumatic event in my life, I used it to open the door to astrology. I'm an 8th house Pluto, as you'll see. I started asking why? Minister didn't answer questions, left the church. The psychology books in the library, as I tell the story, it kind of helped, but it just wasn't hitting the spot. I was in a regular bookstore and I picked up a sun sign book on astrology. And it went through the 12 signs and gave the positive and negative traits of each sun sign. I read the negative traits of my sun sign, Scorpio, and light bulbs went off. I was like, oh my gosh, here's something that's describing how I feel. And it was history from there. I just started gobbling up astrology books. And so Uranus is also the principle of a socialized purpose. We hear of Uranus being those like-minded individuals. It's our friendships. It's our groups. It's our tribe. You know, it's the social faction or subgroup that we get along with. And so Uranus then leads us into working with society, working through society. It can almost be the Capricorn that is then followed by Uranus or Aquarius. Capricorn, we have to grow up and become a social functioning individual, the adult. Well, then Aquarius following, we can be the souls who want to change society or fulfill some function or purpose in society on broader and broader scales. And so Uranus has as much leadership potential, and that includes Aquarius 11th house. That archetype has as much potential for leadership as does the polarity Sun, Leo, and 5th house. Sometimes that Sun and Leo, 5th house, will go, look at me, see me, notice me, aren't I pretty, aren't I rich? Whereas the Uranus Aquarius 11th house side is going, but we have to figure out what's good for the group. And I think I know, and I think I can help the group create some change in society. We can create that living wage, whether it's, you know, the $15 minimum wage that we're looking at in the United States or something else. So there's a broadening to the socialized purpose when we look at Uranus Aquarius 11th house. And of course, social change occurs when enough people of like mind bond together to enforce change within society relative to whatever is outmoded with society. Just look, for example, at this transiting South Node in Aquarius, and how it is just really activating so many groups of people. I'm talking from the perspective of the US, but it's probably going on relative to any country, okay? But how many groups of people are just deciding to, you know, run for office locally, statewide, nationally in the United States because of what is going on in regards to the Trump administration and all of the social mores that they are just setting back and setting back and setting back. Stay tuned. You know, those of you, we just did that long series on Uranus transiting through Taurus and how we're all going to have to become activists in regards to resources as we move through our insecurities around it. And then collectively, Uranus and Taurus, how are we as groups of people going to change the distribution of resources, as 3 people in the United States have as much wealth as the bottom half of the US citizenship, as 8 people in the world have as much wealth as the bottom half of citizens in the world. 8 people have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people. Tell me we're not in need of some Uranian change. And yes, this can interact with that Plutonian cataclysmic evolution or slow Darwinian uniform evolution. Those get involved as well, especially when we have Uranus, Pluto in aspects to each other. However, what do we look at? Many times again, that reaction to cling to the past. People can fear change. They fear being or feeling different. And especially if they did not embrace that Uranian impulse to individualize. All right, so if you feel that there's anything with Uranus that I didn't mention, by all means, type it into the Q&A panel, or Leroy can unmute you to speak live if you want. We're next going to go through a series of slides that we show every month. Thank you for allowing me to repeat them as briefly as I can. The purpose is that each one of these classes can then stand as an individual class. It can stand on its own in regards to that particular planet square the nodes. So let's look at some nodal axis astronomy. North Node, South Node are points in space where the moon's path intercepts the path of the ecliptic. The ecliptic is the sun's apparent path around the Earth, but in actuality, it's the Earth moving around the sun. North Node is where the moon's path crosses above the ecliptic. 2 weeks later, the moon's path crosses below the ecliptic, and that's the South Node. Here is a visual of this. Here is the sun's apparent path. Here is the moon's path. And so here is the moon's path going above, the arrow's going this way. Here's the moon's path going above the sun's path, or the ecliptic, North Node. 2 weeks later, the moon's path going below the ecliptic, point of the South Node. Now the nodal axis reverses through the zodiac about every 18.5 years. It signifies a return to universal source on the solar lunar level. The nodal axis is retrograde 90% of the time, direct 10% of the time. Those of you born with your nodes retrograde, you can get a stronger sense of your destiny earlier in life. If you are one of the 10% born with the nodes direct, that sense of destiny comes later in life. I was one of the 10%, and that has definitely been the case for me. I did a lot of consensus jobs through my teens and my 20s, and even through my 30s. I had a brief time period in environmental politics, and then I went back to a consensus job. And so I was in my early 40s before I really broke out of consensus work. Started doing my astrology full time, and found some other alternative work as well. The nodal axis transits each sign of the zodiac for approximately 18 months. The South Node, this is the soul's ego from the past. It's the accumulation of all the emotional residues from all our past lives. Represents security, Represents karma on every level, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. It's a point of familiarity, both positive and negative. Positive, it's our gifts, fruition, prior efforts that we've made. The negative, it's where we didn't quite get something. We have to redo it, relive it. It's called the Achilles heel sometimes. The South Node can also be that point of stagnation. It is the prior mode of operation on emotional levels, the ego, that allowed the prior karmic dynamic or natal Pluto to be actualized. You look at the number of aspects the South Node makes to other planets to see how active it was in actualizing natal Pluto from the past and past lives. And you determine the aspects to the rulers of the South Node by both sign and house. They will add in extra detail as well. Now, the North Node is the leading edge development of the soul's ego in this life. It is our emotional growth and evolution into the future. It represents insecurity because it's unknown. It represents the Dharma, how we are moving forward into the future. And I forgot to close my door. Hopefully it's not too loud. It is a sense of destiny or a magnetic pull forward for ourselves. It is the point of movement versus South Node point of stagnation. It is the current mode of operation on emotional levels that allows the evolutionary intent to be actualized, or the Pluto polarity point. That is actualized through that movement of the North Node. And I will say this is true. Well, this is probably my next slide if I've got this correctly. One more slide. Look at the number of aspects that the North Node makes to see how active it is in helping the soul pull itself forward and in its emotional movement and evolution forward as well. And then you will also look at the rulers of the North Node by sign and house and see how they add more detail to the North Node and that emotional evolution going forward. Here's the slide I thought of. The past and the future are always in the tension of the present moment. Past South Node, future North Node, tension of the present moment is the moon. Now, this is active in the natal chart for a lifetime. You look at where the natal South Node, North Node, moon are, add on sign, houses, and aspects. This is also true with the transiting nodes and transiting moon at any moment. I know the transiting node is, the South Node's in Aquarius and the North Node's in Leo, but I gotta tell, I think the moon's in Taurus, isn't it? I think the moon's in Taurus getting ready to go into Gemini. I could be wrong, but can you just see if we have the moon in Taurus and it's square the transiting nodes, there will be an emotional stuckness. There will be a need for emotional security. There will, be that few hours opportunity where we really have to work emotionally to process through and not create skip steps, moon and Taurus square the nodes, if that's where it is. Maybe it's already past it. Point is, the past is always trying to shape the future in the present moment. We're always projecting that past forward to be secure. So, can you see how much sense it makes to have the nodes move retrograde? Who divined that? Who created that? That, again, that retrograde mean motion of the nodes is helping us to leave that past behind and actually move forward. Now, let me show you the how we look at determining aspects to the nodal axis. Apologies, I got to have a drink of water. In EA, we start with the planet and compare the nodes to the planet. So even though through this series I say Uranus square the nodes, when you are looking at the nodal axis, it's the nodes that are really squaring the planet. You start with the planet, and in this example here, I use Uranus. You start with Uranus, and if you follow this inner circle, Uranus is 19 Gemini, 9 minutes. If you follow this inner circle to the South Node is 19 Sag, 36 minutes. If it was 19.9, it'd be exact. It is a gibbous opposition, South Node, gibbous opposition to Uranus. If we look at Uranus North Node, you start with Uranus. Here we use the outer circle. We go all the way around. And the North Node is a balsamic conjunction to Uranus. If the North Node was over here at 18 degrees Gemini, it'd be a new phase conjunction. If you want more detail on determining phases and aspects, there's a whole series on it in segment 1. Here's how we look at these skip steps with these planets square the nodes. Again, you start with a node. And in this example, we're looking at Pluto, 16 degrees Virgo, all right? And we reverse through the zodiac. We go clockwise because that is the direction the moon's nodes go, reversing through the zodiac. And we get to the first node. This will also be what we call the resolution node. And again, in this example, the North Node is an applying square to Pluto. It's not quite 90 degrees yet. If that North Node was 16 degrees Gemini, then it'd be exact square. And if that North Node was 12 degrees Gemini, it'd be a separating or first quarter square. And in general, when the nodes are applying squares to the planet, there's more buildup of skip steps, and they could continue to build up that skip step energy if they don't really make an effort to work on it. When you have planets exactly square the nodes, or the nodes exactly square the planet, there is a strong intensity, excuse my burps, to address the issue and change. If the nodes are separating squares to the planet, then it means they could have had a prior life that they've already been working on that issue. And it's a little easier to resolve the skip steps. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean you can't resolve the skip steps with applying squares, especially when you've got the knowledge of astrology and what it is that you really need to address in regards to that planet skip steps and evolving that planet. Now, when there are planets square the nodes, and it creates this condition we call skip steps in EA, both nodes were active in creating karma in past lives. That means the South Node created karma in past lives, but so did the North Node create karma in past lives. Both of those nodes were active, and you want to read it that way with the chart. You have to extrapolate beyond South Node past, North Node future. Yes, that North Node still has some future to it, but you want to recognize both nodes were active in past lives. What happened, though, is that planet went back and forth between those two nodes in past lives, and it skipped over its own lessons rather than integrating them. So we call that planetary archetypes development arrested. It's not fully functioning. And when the planet has skipped back and forth between those two nodes, you've got to find that resolution node, because that's the bottom line that has to be referred to in order for that planet to get unstuck and evolve. Now, I showed you the example with, I showed you the visual example before going through the list. You start with the planet, you go clockwise to the first node. It's the node that last moved over the planet, and that becomes the resolution node. Now, when we look at the resolution node being South Node, that planetary archetype must be resolved through consistent application via that South Node. That means we've got to go back to the past, and we've got to redo it, readdress it. We've got to go clean up something from the past. And as we do that, then it will allow the North Node to eventually move forward. When the resolution node is the North Node, that means that planet must be resolved through consistent application via the North Node. The future becomes the bottom line, moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. It's not about jumping back to the past because the unknown future gets scary. It's consistently moving that planet forward into the future. And as we do that, then the South Node will be able to metamorphose itself. Now, I also have a couple of slides here in regards to determining aspects to planets, just so that we're clear on that. Works out to be a little bit of a review for you. So here is the cycle of phases and aspects that, to the best of my knowledge, was originally created by Dane Rudier. And then it was adapted by Jeffrey Green from his work. And then I adapted it a little bit further. Jeffrey used to have 0 degrees here, and then he'd go 360. I got, well, this way, sorry. I match the 0 degrees up with the beginning of the chart because this is so Aryan and this is so Piscean. And over the years, as I've taught it, I've just seen the 12 archetypes contained within these 8 phases. And so I kind of just slid it around the circle. If you want my little Mercury details. But here's how we determine aspects to planets. All right. And I have evolved this a little bit as well. This is also why I put this slide in here. Jeffrey's teachings say that every planet's compared to the sun because it is the center of the solar system and it is the life-giving force. It's true. You can use that if you want. Over time, as I have observed it from a geocentric or Earth-centered perspective, and as I have taught, as I have written and spoke forecasting for, I don't know, 20 years, I started comparing the sun to the outer planets. And so for me, I will compare Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars to the sun, but I will compare the sun to Jupiter, Saturn, Chiron on out. So using these examples for you, first of all, Mercury, Pluto, this inner circle, we start with Pluto at 1035 Leo. We go counterclockwise all the way around the circle to Mercury. Mercury's a balsamic conjunction to Pluto. If we look at Pluto and Venus, we start with this outer circle here with Pluto, and we go this far to Venus. Venus's new phase to Pluto. If we look at this switch that I first heard of this from Laura Nalbandian, and when I heard her say that, I was like, oh, there's someone else who thinks that way. And then I just really started moving forward with using it. So in this case, if we look at Saturn and the sun, I now start with Saturn and I go clockwise, counterclockwise, excuse me, all the way around the circle. And the sun is balsamic phase to Saturn. All right, makes sense. Any questions on that? You're welcome to ask. That's all the slides I have. All right, here we go. My chart. I've showed it once or twice over the years, but I don't know if I've ever put my chart in a webinar yet. I'm going to take another drink of water. Questions, anything? All right.
Hold on.
Here is Kim Marie's chart.
Hold on just a moment, Kim. I got a question from the board, if you don't mind.
Okay.
When a planet is square the node, when the planet that is square the node is retrograde, well, I'll just read you what this question is. Can Kim address when the planet square the nodes is retrograde and its expression via the resolution node?
Okay. Well, if that planet is retrograde, what it's going to do is create more intensity to literally throw off all of the conditioning factors and have that planet liberate itself. Now, as that planet is going through all of that liberation, as it's trying to, you know, again, I'm talking general, I'm not talking specific to Uranus deconditioning, liberating. You know, a retrograde planet is trying to throw off all the conditioning factors from the past and individualize that planetary archetype for that soul in question. So that retrograde creates that intensity to liberate and individualize that planet. However, it still has to work through whichever resolution node is the resolution node. If that retrograde planet has a resolution south node, it's got to go back and clean up the past relative to that planet. If it's the north node, it's got to be moving forward. The retrograde, again, it intensifies the energy to break free and individualize that planetary archetype. Clear? If not, you know, type some more in. Or I don't have any retrograde planets, so I can't use myself as an example here. But maybe over the next 2 classes we can have a chart example where they're with a retrograde planet. Any other questions? Okay, so are you muted or you got yourself live? Okay. Any questions come up, by all means, continue to type into the Q&A board or put your hand up and Leroy can unmute you. Kim Marie's chart. I was born October 24th, 57, 12:43 p.m. at Presidio Army Hospital in San Francisco. You see here that, well, my parents are middle class. They're retired farmers. My dad got out of the military when I was 6 months old. And so I was raised on a farm in eastern South Dakota in the cornfields. I didn't get off a tractor till I was 26. I have 2 younger sisters. One sister is 3 years younger. My baby sister is 17 years younger than me. I had a baby on my hip my senior year of high school, and she was my sister. My middle sister had extreme allergies, and so I ended up being my dad's hired hand and literally worked in the fields with him. I went through 2 years of college, didn't graduate, but I came home every weekend and just helped out on the farm. I had an early marriage, the one I told you about, from 20 to 26. We had no kids. Ex left me for best friend. That's when I found astrology. I was single from 26 through 44. I think Leroy and I got married when I was in middle 40s. We will be married 15 years in October. His son Forrest has been in my life since he was in his mother's belly. I had one girlfriend take a husband away from me, and I had another girlfriend give me a husband. How's that joke, Leroy? Leroy and his partner went their separate ways when their son was 2. I remained friends with both of them. When their son was 6, Leroy and I started dating. When Forrest was 10, he came to live with us. And when Forrest was 16, we lost his mother to cancer. So he's now 22. I've been a full-time astrologer for almost 2 decades. And I also have my other work, my energetic balancing work. I'm a facilitator for an organization called EMC Squared that has a 24/7 self-healing program via computers. We impart 500,000 frequencies into your photograph 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've done that work for 18 years. And I love both of them. I forgot to put in, I'm also certified as a deep memory processing past life regressionist in the Roger Wolger method. 2135 Cap rising. I'm an 8th house Pluto, potpourri houses, Virgo's intercepted, Pisces polarity point is intercepted here. Here's the Uranus square the nodes. I have Uranus at 11.5 Leo in the 7th. And the resolution node is the South Node in Taurus 3rd at 10.5. And as you see the S here, I don't remember if it's stationary direct or stationary retrograde, but it is direct. I don't remember that one. I also have Chiron square the nodes. As you can see here, Chiron in a full phase opposition to Uranus, and the resolution node for Chiron is the North Node. Probably the biggest thing that I would say with Uranus square the nodes is that ruler South Node, Taurus, Venus over here in Sag, ruler by house Mercury up here in a stellium with the Sun. Ruler of the North Node sign is Pluto. Ruler of the North Node house is Jupiter over here. So 5 planets in the 9th house. I also have 7 planets either in Sag or 9th house. Back to Uranus. Probably the biggest thing for me with Uranus square the nodes is that I was extremely shy growing up. I was the little nerd, you know. When I graduated from high school, there were 5 of us that were chosen to give graduation speeches. And it was a really big moment for me. We had like 5 minutes. I actually got a standing ovation when I gave my speech. That was my breaking out to speak out in graduation. But I was very shy, and I was very insecure, and I was extremely codependent. You know, I chased guys away because if I had a second date, I had us married, 8th house Pluto. And so I would have several. I'd make the first few dates and then they'd disappear. So when my divorce happened in my mid-20s, it rocked my world so much that it almost like jumpstart Uranus, kicked it into gear. By the way, in astrocartography, see Uranus right here? I live in western South Dakota. I was raised in eastern South Dakota. The Uranus on the descendant in astrocartography cuts through the middle of the state. I have lived on my Uranus line, except for maybe 1 year out of my life. So talk about I catapulted forward. I just went I went the extreme opposite. I just said, I got to figure out this independence thing. Here's that South Node down here in Taurus. I really got to figure out how to be self-reliant within myself. The skip steps back and forth of going back and forth here, I think what it means for me in my chart, coming from an 8th house Pluto, there was a lot of codependency here. And I made some efforts with self-reliance, but it wasn't ever really accomplished. And even after my marriage broke up in the 20s, even all the way through my 30s, I had a couple of somewhat long-term relationships. I had a couple of somewhat short-term relationships, and I would still recognize how codependent I was. And it was as I got into my late 30s and my early 40s when I really, really started getting this self-reliance thing. And I mean, now Leroy might feel differently, but for the most part, I think I have really made an effort with this South Node in Taurus third to being fairly self-reliant. Maybe not quite as 3rd house flexible as my husband would like me to be, but I've can get to that self-reliance pretty good. Uranus in the 7th house in Leo, this is who will love me, who will see me, who will notice me. And I had a rageaholic father. And so I didn't have a good role model with males. And, even though I had to work the fields with my father constantly, it wasn't an easy relationship. I was close to my mother, but I had all that 8th house Pluto insecurity. And so I was raised to be a wife and a mother. And that's really how strong my conditioning factors were. That's all I thought I was going to do. That's all I wanted to be. And when my ex, when we were splitting up in my mid-20s, he said, you know what? I feel like I hold you back. He says, you don't give yourself credit for how much you can do. And you need to just go out in the world and do it. Well, at the time, I just wanted to, punch his teeth out for leaving me. But that, that conversation just still sticks in my mind. And, now I'm grateful to him for bringing about the catalyst, the shock and the trauma of Uranus in relationships. And now I've worked with that Uranian loving of myself that I rarely ever do a compare and contrast. Maybe little ways in which, well, I wish I was 10 pounds less than I weigh right now, that kind of stuff. But having a sense of self and who I am, regardless of others, I've really worked on going back and establishing that self-reliance. And so I have this strong sense of myself that has come through. And that is then, of course, activated this North Node where, probably my evolutionary astrology work is the biggest thing activating this North Node here that is conjunct just shy of the midheaven. Leroy, comments from you? Anybody else? Comments, questions? I'm so used to analyzing other people's charts that I feel like I'm telling a story rather than analyzing my own chart. So I'm just trying to think of things.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, you've kind of lived your chart, pretty well, I would say. Yeah, I do understand that flip-flopping between nodes as being a key part of this lesson, planets square the nodes. And because of the, of the strict conditioning factors and all of that, I can see all of that operating within you, even since we've known each other, but known your sisters as well as I do, and their conditioning factors, and how they haven't necessarily liberated themselves through, I don't know, I guess I would call these, higher mind Uranian type ventures like energetic balancing and evolutionary astrology, for God's sakes. Um, you've really been able to take those to new heights amidst the confusion from your family, who just doesn't really understand very much about Kim Marie, what she does. But they seem to have a nice house and pretty self-sufficient. But what's that stuff again? And so bridging astrology conversations and quantum healing with your family is always a challenge. I watch the confusion, and then they just move on to talk about the weather.
My family never, ever asks me about my work. The only thing, my mom tries to understand a little bit, but she just didn't develop an interest of wanting to study it. For mom, it's basically like, okay, so what's your travel schedule? Yeah, no, I don't get anybody in my family asking me about myself, or how do I feel, or what do I think, or what's going on in your world, how's your job. They did a little bit. They always asked about you last year, Leroy, with your health issues, but otherwise, yeah, I get along with my family, but I don't really necessarily get fed from my family.
It's a stranger in a strange land. Another important part about Uranian
Uranus square the nodes. Yeah. And how, and I went the extreme. My two sisters, although none of us are on the farm, and we're all, city folk now, neither one of my sisters really broke out of the farm conditioning factors. They're, still right there in the traumas of the world. Because I have Chiron square the nodes, to just bring this in for you, Chiron in Aquarius, okay, it's in Uranus's sign. The Chiron in Aquarius mini generation, I don't know if you remember this from the Chiron series that we did. Chiron spends 2/3, 30 of the 50 years in Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus. So there's a fair amount of, Chiron in Aquarius mini generation. But that's just woundedness to who you are as an individual, Aquarius. And Chiron in Aquarius, it can be a signature of having more intense karma or trauma, excuse me. It can be, a trauma signature. And of course, how many of us, in the what was it, 40 some Chiron Uranus oppositions? I mean, it is a whole decades of us souls who are just wounded with being seen and who we uniquely are, regardless of the signs that they're in. And for me, Chiron in the first house is woundedness to my individuality as well, woundedness to how I see myself. Because again, that shyness that would just, I try to just go with the crowd and fit in, not be noticed. And I'd have some trauma or drama, Scorpio, something come up on the surface, and I'd feel, mortified, being, noticed or humiliated in front of everybody. But I will say this, Chiron, for me, as I have, resolution note for Chiron here is this North Node. I moved forward and found astrology. And I paid no attention to it in high school. People, well, I did it as a teenager. No, I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any of that until I had my shock and I went searching and found it. But this Chiron resolution to the North Node, I've been into this alternative healing now for the last 20 years and doing something that is so natural law, ninth house, so breaking free. It's really allowed me to heal. And I think what I have found is a lot of my healing qualities within myself. Now, I'll say one of the things about my Chiron in the first house, sometimes it's physical wounds to the body, and I don't have any of that. I did break my wrist once, but I don't have any major health issues. I don't have any, wounds to the physical body. Maybe some of it is the strength of the South Node. I don't know. But, as I've looked at this Chiron square the nodes, I think it is just the healer being able to find her courage again, to be different, to be myself, to be that group of one, and to go out there into the world and actually do the alternative work. And if you've been paying any attention to the transits, I've had transiting South Node on my Chiron, while transiting North Node has been on my Uranus. And, I've kind of been exploding in regards to work again, and transiting Pluto went retrograde 1/2 a degree from my ascendant, and I'm feeling it on the ascendant, but it's not there yet. But anyway, point is, my work is, especially the astrology work, it's just going through another wave of exploding. And I guess what happened for me with these transiting nodes is I had to have a conversation with Leroy and just say, honey, I need help. I need another redistribution of household and work duties. and I thank you, Leroy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm trying to work with my mute button on my headset, actually, so I'm sorry. I just have a comment about that Aquarius Leo opposition there. It's part of that story of Chiron is as the wounded healer is about that place where that weak link in your matrix, so to speak, to talk more modern-esque about it. And that day you walked up on the stage and was able to speak for 5 minutes in front of the student body upon your graduation, to me was a big opening that allowed you to understand how powerful of a teacher, of a speaker you can be. And that's one thing when we first met that I was always impressed with, to have the clarity of your words and the energy behind it, the intent behind that is, to me, you've turned that, used astrology, North Node, Scorpio North Node in the 9th house to refine that ability to speak the word of God, so to speak.
Yeah. I did when I divorced in my mid-20s and I moved to Western South Dakota, which is Black Hills. We live in the mountains. Haven't been in the prairie for 35 years. In my late 20s, right around my Saturn return, I got involved in environmental politics. And I ended up leading a statewide group while we did about 4 years. And I went to the legislature and I lobbied environmental politics for like 6 or 7 years. But for 4 years, we did, most states, you have your initiative and referendum process every other year, so the even years. And so I ended up being involved in 3 cycles, and I led 2 of the cycles. And boy, I'll tell you what, I was on TV. I was speaking all across the state. I had to fundraise. There was a group of us, but I was the voice of the group. And instead of dressing like a hippie or a tree hugger, although that's what I was called. You know, I was the dress and the nylons and the high heels, and I looked so consensus, but I would open my mouth up, and I really had to learn how to debate. And the issue politics we were doing, it was when, for those of you who may know that, at one point, the Black Hills had the Homestake gold mine, and it was the, I can't remember the statistic, largest underground gold mine in northern, in the Western Hemisphere or something like that. And they were starting to strip mine. And then it was also when the East Coast was wanting to start railroading garbage and build big garbage dumps out on our flat shale. And so we actually took on both of those issues. And the Mining Association actually hired a female to debate me because the males weren't very effective. It was that gender thing. You know, and I could I rattled those facts off. I was scared to death. I was nervous all the time, you know, but I did it. And I came through, and we won 3 out of the 4 initiatives in those 2 cycles, and turned the whole strip mining in the Black Hills around. I called it my Peace Corps days, because by the time it was over, I was in debt and I couldn't afford to do it anymore. And so then I went back to some consensus work to pay off my debts and make money again. And I went back to studying my astrology. I never stopped studying astrology. And a couple of the board members were just scared to death somebody was going to dig up that Kim Marie was an astrologer, and it would just, you know, be front page news and ruin everything, and it never happened. I was also a belly dancer, and it was the same issue, and it never happened.
Well, back to the chart for a moment. We have somebody on the board here. It's noticing the repeating theme of, you know, the rulers of Uranus by house and sign, and of course the rulers of Chiron by house and sign. You know, are real present in the chart. And she was curious. Well, I went to the wrong question. But, you know, can you have any comments on that? Of course, we've talked about the rulers.
Yeah, the rulers of the nodes, or the rulers of the signs, probably the whole works.
Yeah, the rulers of that opposition in the 1st and 7th. Yes, the Uranus Chiron opposition. The rulers. I'm just acknowledging this student for kind of taking a deeper look at the chart by finding those ruling planets and making comments.
Yeah, and part of what I'm hearing is, you know, sometimes people will cast the chart without Chiron. I use it just like all the other planets, and it makes me have a bowl, okay? But if you take Chiron out, I'm a locomotive. I have every planet within 120 degrees. The planets are congregated in 1/3 of the chart, and they're at the top of the chart, which means going out into the world. And so it was kind of like, you know, sooner or later, guess what? That's what's going to happen. So it doesn't matter whether you look at the South Node or you look at this opposition, all the rulers are up here. And, you know, pulling me out there into the world.
How do you interpret, Kim? Can you say something about the nodes related to the 3rd and 9th houses? You know, you don't really talk a lot about the mutability of yourself, and you know, you do have, you know, there's with that power pack 9th house. You know, there is in the South Node down there in the 3rd. It's what's your read on that over time? Have you really experienced, you know, that mutability?
Well, what would happen is when I get the Uranian shakeups, you know, in relationships in any way, it would trigger security, okay? But for the most part, I was just very 3rd, 9th. you know, you wouldn't always notice that 8th house Pluto under the surface. Everybody would notice the talkative one and, oh, okay, if that's what you want to do, well, let's go to this movie. Oh, no, you want to go to this restaurant instead? Okay, I'll do that. So for me, those nodes in the 3rd, 9th, I was just very flexible, adaptable, going to do whatever anybody else wanted to do. You know, I wasn't the one who would say, we have to go to this restaurant. It was more that I'll just, you know, get along to get along.
I'm very familiar with your Mars in Libra. Yes.
Well, no,
Nobody-
Uranus in the 7th, square nodes 3rd, 9th.
and supported by Mars, Jupiter, and Libra. And
Supported by that, yes.
nobody with Mars and Libra is ever going to be the one to pick the restaurant. I'll promise you that.
Yeah, but again, you can still see this with that, you know, Uranus in the 7th, the Libra house.
Yep.
Square nodes in 3rd and 9th, the flexibility, the adaptability, all of the communications, you know, I'll just, you know, go along to get along was a lot of it, except when I get triggered. When I get triggered, then all the fixed signs would just dig in, you know, and I would become, and I'd get very circular argumentativeness, all based around, you know, being secure, and would come back around and back around and back around, you know, just to the same argument rather than Uranus square the nodes, being able to listen and actually open up to something, a different perspective. And, you know, Leroy can probably, you know, confirm that I can still be that way. I can be very easygoing until I get triggered. And once I get triggered, it just, that fixed energy just, you know, shuts me down, and it takes me a while to get beyond the circular thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can go into lockup.
Mm-hmm.
And we all can, and I notice that, you know, monthly when we go through the paying the bills and the accounting and all of that, you know, that tends to be a trigger for you, you know, South Node Taurus. And
8th house Pluto.
8th
house Pluto.
There's
You
not
know,
going to be enough.
the resource triggers, South Node in Taurus, the resource triggers. You know, my family didn't always have resources growing up, and being a farmer, you know, you never knew when you were going to have, you know, not enough to eat. We always had meat because we raised hogs and beef, so we always had meat. But my mom worked, so there was not a vegetable garden. And so I will say I did have health issues, Chiron in the 1st house, the physical body. I did have some health issues when I was growing up, but they were all colds, and, you know, the cold and flu thing, which is the flushing, because my mom's solution to any health issue was antibiotics. I was given a lot of antibiotics as a kid. The pharmacist was a friend of hers. So mom didn't even go to the doctor. She just went to the pharmacist and he'd give her some more antibiotics. And this was before we knew, you know, how accumulating and detrimental they could be. So, you know, I was always sick with colds and flus because I did not have a lot of fresh food going up. And you were forced to eat the meat. You did not leave the table till you ate the protein that was put on your plate. And Leroy wonders why I cannot stand beef for the most part. So that was a little Chiron in that, you know, the Aquarius, sometimes we'll think of Uranus as always being, you know, the nervous system, but sometimes it is, you know, things not flushing in the body, that fixed energy that, you know. that can be there.
Just Chiron in the first, head colds.
Head colds, good one. Yes. Oh man. And Leroy's have what? I don't get them very much. My energetic balancing is really, that turned my life around in that perspective. But every few years, usually it's a new frequency added to the program and I have to clear it. And sometimes that detox, will come through. So I've had a couple of those. I did want to, again, any comments or questions on the chart, please feel free to ask. I don't mind. I'm always analyzing everybody else's, so turn around, fair play, huh? Uranus in the 7th. But I did want to say that, what can happen for some souls, and, you guys probably, I consider myself first spirituated, so that Reader's Digest of breaking out of consensus, individuating, and really finding that, deep internal security of first spirituated. But, with Uranus, square the nodes, you do have to, all the planets square the nodes, but Uranus square the nodes in consensus. They will just, keep trying to fit in. They will not want to break free. Uranus square the nodes individuated. First individuated wants to go back to consensus and fit in. Second individuated, Uranus square the nodes, they're just going to become, the anarchist, or just literally, rebels of the zodiac and can't hold a friendship for any length of time. And then as Uranus starts moving into third individuated square the nodes, it starts picking up speed in being able to, break free, to actually search for more independent-minded groups in addition to their own individualization process. But, almost all Uranus square the nodes are trauma, there's trauma. And I, have had enough past lives that, I know the traumas, in my last lifetime, I died in the gas chambers with 3 young children. The lifetime before that, in the early 1900s, I was I crashed my airplane. Think of those little Snoopy airplanes that when they first came out, I crashed my airplane. The lifetime before that, either 3 or 4 lifetimes ago, I don't know for sure. I had a lifetime where I died as an alcoholic male with a broken heart. I've had more and more recent lifetimes switching back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so there's some patterning of the trauma being related to children. And again, this lifetime conditioning factors, that being raised to be a wife and a mother, and then just being, scared. I had a close call of thinking I was pregnant with my first husband. And when it turned out to not be the case, then he filed for divorce. I realized over the years, if I don't have any children, they can't die on me. They can't leave me. I won't have the loss. So I have several past life sessions in which the issue would be me as a child, raped by the pastor, put in stocks and starved to death because it was my fault in the Puritan days, lifetimes involving, children with me as the child or as the mother losing the child. That theme is probably coming more or less around moon in 10th in Scorpio. There'll be other signatures with it as well. Sometimes South Node in Taurus, the survival issues and survival issues with family members, 3rd house. So I feel that I still have a lot of trauma in me. And I still have, you know, my instinctive reaction when, you know, I think anything is traumatic, whether it is to the next person or not, I register it as traumatic. And I'm like, oh my God, it's going to go to hell in a handbasket. And I just have to kind of take a deep breath and calm myself down and go, you know, it's okay. You know, probably one of the best things for me is I married a third house Pluto. And that third house Pluto goes, well, wouldn't it be nice? Well, what if it was this? And he just, you know, floats along, and, you know, it really gives me some good feedback to try and pull 8th house Pluto Uranus square the nodes out of the freezing. And then I can calm down, Taurus, and breathe. Because that's something that when I was younger, this is 3rd, 9th nodal axis. When I was younger, I had extremely shallow breathing. It was just like, okay, don't take up too much space. Don't let anybody notice you. You know, rageaholic father, run to the bedroom. Just be real quiet, be real silent. And then as I started, you know, coming out and finding my voice, you know, I'm 5 feet and I can probably yell louder than anybody in the room, whatever room I'm in. And sometimes now I have to go, okay, Kim, just tone down your voice a little. You don't have to be that loud. The other thing that I specifically did, lifetimes as an Oriental dancer, and I remember one lifetime in particular in which didn't make it out of the harem very easy. Didn't make it out of the harem. But I got into dancing, and I've always been, I didn't do any of it in high school. I was in no sports. I was in none of that stuff. I was in band, music, and I didn't have enough lungs to really play the cornet. Ugh. But as I got into my 20s and I went after my divorce, I went to the gym. I started lifting weights. I started dancing, and I found my lungs. And I've still got them. And that's 3rd, 9th, okay? 3rd house Gemini is breath in. 9th house Sag is breath out. So Gemini takes it in, and 9th or Sagittarius integrates it. This is why I say Jupiter square the nodes, their skip steps and integration. So that was something that I really brought forth with this nodes. And, you know, as we spoke, you know, Chiron, the wounding, where is it with the body? And I'm going, oh, well, wait a minute. Yeah, lots of cold, and, you know, no nutrition, and no breath. And that's, again, when Uranus gets square, when I get Uranian trigger, I'll just freeze. And I'll go, oh yeah, breathe. So, answering questions, anything else, you know, just trying to speak Uranus square the nodes in general. Are you using a new headset, Leroy?
Yes, I am using a new headset, and I'm any feedback there, or we could talk about it later. But I'm trying to use the mute button on the headset itself, so I hope it's not distracting.
It's kind of got a little bit of a background hum or noisiness to it, and then it goes away.
Well, we'll just use the board.
But whenever you're switching back and forth, it kind of I hear it anyway.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, no, the board's pretty quiet, but you certainly, we are very familiar with this chart around the house here, obviously. And but it's, you know, Uranus is all about progress, and you've made more progress this lifetime, you know, from where you began this life to where you are now. It's been a good one.
It's just been light years of growth compared to the child and young adult that I was, and, you know, where I am now.
Right. And, you know, that it's interesting that, you know, you see that signature there in the 7th house, and it as you grow and outgrow, in many ways, you've outgrown a lot of your own family members. And I know that that's been a stressful thing. Whereas, 20 years
That
ago, it was always about going home and showing the corn and but I'm just speaking about your growth and of course your evolutionary state with your parents. It's almost such a dichotomy. It can wear you out during some of these family gatherings, these large family gatherings. I see that as a big shift, and there's no judgment, no right or wrong. Nothing happened, no
Mhm,
big trauma,
mhm.
Uranus, except you outgrew. For the progress that a Uranus in Leo square the nose can make in a lifetime is tremendous, and I think that's part of what's going on with you as you move forward here into your later years.
You reminded me of something as well with Uranus in the seventh. I have a diversity of people in my life. Some are acquaintances, some are friends, but I guess with with Uranus square the nodes in third, ninth, I have such a wide variety of people in my world, and I don't judge it. I hang out with consensus golfers. I hang out with all my new age metaphysical friends. I hang out, consensus individuated, spirituated. I go the whole realm, but I'll get involved with this group. Or I'm a master gardener, and I had a MG meeting this morning because we do an annual garden walk where you tour homes and look at all the pretty, flowers and gardens. And we had a conversation at the end of our meeting about Catholic celibacy, because so one of the master gardeners had a grandson who is just being ordained as a priest. And it was such a wide, diverse conversation. And again, most of these master gardeners are probably consensus, but we all have our activity, which is the love of gardening and educating people on gardening. And every single one of them, some Catholic, some non-Catholic, but, out of, 7, 8 committee members, every single one of them thought Catholic priests should be allowed to get married. So, that is one thing about that Uranus in the seventh, and again, square the nodes in third, ninth. I'll just go have these third house detailed conversations, and well, what about this fact? What about this idea? What about, and with this resolution node here, what I know for me is I know my security within myself. So I can have a conversation, third house, with someone without thinking that I have to have the upper hand or I have to be right and they have to be wrong. Sometimes, and especially, and we know this with the different evolutionary states of consciousness, sometimes it's just like, well, it's probably not going to be worth it to really go to the nth degree of the conversation with this person because they won't understand it. They'll get triggered. Then I'll get triggered. I'll just see, so I have this interplay within myself mentally, South Node, third house, where I'll share information as I feel the person will understand it, but I can then also just let it go. Unless it's the television set and Trump is on. Then it's a whole nother story. But I do. I don't think anything of it. Some people won't, go out of the house and interact with a certain group of people, and I'll just like, well, I can interact with them. I might not agree with them. I might get into an argument with them, but I could also just save my time. And so I don't always want to hang around with some people, but I can go through, you know, a big backyard party with, you know, all kinds of different people and just kind of move through everybody and converse as anybody, you know, needs to converse. I think it's one of the things that's also probably, you know, helped me move into reading charts so well. You know, that I will say, you know, the memories popped in. The very first reading I ever had was with Jeffrey. He was the first person to read my chart. And he says, you will have he says, you will be able to create an ability to communicate with a diverse variety of people, and you will be able to converse with someone where they need to hear. And that, to me, I just thought he meant that in general, because that's what we do with evolutionary astrology. You talk above consensus and they're confused. You talk below individuated and they're bored. So you've got to adjust language, 3rd house, 9th house, okay? You have to learn how to adjust language to meet the person where they're at. And I do feel that that is something, you know, of course, all this 9th house and Sag stuff speaks to that. But again, they're all rulers with these, you know, planets right here. So even, you know, square the nodes, again, I went from being shy and not being able to speak at all to, I think the shyness more was the 8th house Pluto, excuse me. But to then, you know, again, finding my voice and finding my voice, you know, with a variety of different people. So I'm wandering a little bit, but hopefully that's just, you know, bringing some things in with my chart. Questions or comments? Anybody else?
Nope, we're clear on the board, Kim. Nice job. Thank you.
Well, thank you. My pleasure. I do have 2 volunteers with Pluto square the nodes, but I don't have a Neptune square the nodes. So I know a lot of Neptune square the nodes people with family and friends. I have a lot of them in my life, but I'm not aware of a student. So if you do have Neptune square the nodes, I would love you to volunteer, and I promise that I'll be very, very nice with Neptune. And I'm probably going to take August off, and then I'm thinking planetary pairs, but I'm still debating that. Mars retrograde class, June 25th. Oh, I might change that date. That's the day after the garden walk. And we, oh boy, that date might change. July 23rd is the free Mercury retrograde in Leo. Okay. And then, of course, here's the Chiron series that we just did. And here's the Uranus series, and the Uranus is 30% off until April 20th.
Let me make a little clarity on there. You know, that slide had the wrong coupon code. The discount is the new coupon code for the discount on all the public webinars that we've produced to date on that forecasting webinars page is resource. Resource, RESOURCE. So apply that and get a basket full of PDFs on these major transits that we've been going through: Uranus, Chiron, Saturn, Jupiter, finishing up Jupiter.
All right, well, that's it. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your spring wherever you are. We are finally warming up here in the Black Hills, and we finally got some rain, and everything is starting to bloom just beautifully. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month.